Okay.
We are ready for your storytelling.
Okay, I want to begin by saying Alafia. In Yoruba, when we greet someone with Alafia, it is saying, may you have good health and be at peace with your neighbor. And although we use this greeting all the time, it is especially relevant at a time when we have the pandemics of COVID, of police violence, of misogyny, of economic exploitation and environmental degradation. So I give this to you as a greeting and as a prayer and as an invocation that peace and health manifest in your life. I want to say that this piece that I'm reading now is part of a larger piece that I have not been able to get anybody to publish. So I'm going to have to publish it myself. The title of the piece is The Stained Glass Whore and Other Virgins. And it is a deconstruction of the Madonna whore complex. And I mean, publishers won't touch it because there's too much to deal with in there. So that's one of those, that's one among the 13 that I was talking about earlier that is pretty much demanding my attention. So this is the section called Lilith and Eve. This article views the Genesis myth through the eyes of a little Black girl living in mid-20th century Southern United States. Her world is dominated by Christian beliefs, and saturated with myths and stories, the truths of life that are supposed to serve as guidelines for human behavior. As we proceed, some of you may feel a bit uneasy. I don't think among this group. That's to be expected, especially if you also grew up under the fundamentalist insistence that the Bible is the quote unquote, the absolute and only truth. As we subject this myth to critical examination, you may feel we are breaking a taboo. Take a deep breath and keep reading because we are breaking a taboo. And in doing so, we are freeing ourselves from the shackles of male myths, reclaiming our freedom and celebrating our power. In Bronislaw Malinowski's view, myth as social charter functions by, quote, spelling out in symbolic terms associations between social roles and institutions on the one hand and the psychobiological aspects of the myth tellers on the other. This view regards myth as cultural history only insofar as a particular society makes use of its myths to replicate or reorder its social experience. And this is a quote from Women, Culture, and Society. My life as a woman child was greatly influenced by my culture's myths, especially those drawn from the Bible. Most of us know the general tenor of the popular myth. God created Adam and everything was fine. Then God created Eve. Eve listened to the snake and ate the apple, actually a fig or a pomegranate, and the whole world has been messed up ever since that day. So woman is the root of all evil, and she must be controlled at any cost. But is that what the myth really tells us? Let's take a look. Will the real Eve please stand up? Quote, the man named his wife Eve because she was mother of all the living. Genesis 3:20. Eve was named by Adam according to the biblical myth. The very fact that he is in a position to name her implies that he was first and superior. The power to name is vested in the owner of things. Parents have the right to name their children because they gave birth to them and presumably will be the ones to care for them. This is a benevolent use of that power. When a woman marries, she takes on the last names of her husband. This implies that she is property, which is passed on to her husband from her father. Presumably, this is a willing change, or the woman may retain or create her own name. But dominators usually reserve this right for themselves. As a child, I was very aware that slave traders named their captives long enough to take them to the auction block. Then the slave buyer changed the name again to identify his property. This was done with a branding iron and a whip, with no concern for the person's sense of identity. Explorers travel around the globe, move on to other people's land, sink their flags in the soil, and claim to have discovered continents full of people with ancient civilizations. The theft of the Americas from native peoples and the European colonization of Africa are clear examples. Today, we are extending this practice to other planets. The act of naming is usually followed by more violent acts of exploitation, rape, and murder. Historically, women and gold are the booty of war. So Adam's power to name Eve implies that he came first as her master. But the biblical myth contradicts itself. In Genesis 1:26 to 28, we are told that God created them male and female at the same time as twins and therefore equal. Quote, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. They shall rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle, the whole earth, and all creeping things that creep on earth. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth. Unquote. In my mid-20th century childhood, this directive was interpreted to mean that Black people were predestined to work in the fields, and that enslavement was holy and endorsed by God. By declaring certain people as subhuman, the primitives in Africa or the Jews in Germany, this directive has been used as extended to justify genocide. This directive has been misinterpreted as a license to exploit our natural resources, to drive the plants and the animals into extinction, to destroy the water, the air, and the rainforest. However, in cultures such as the Native Americans and the indigenous Africans, a different myth guides the beliefs and actions of the people. In these cultures, the earth is seen as a great mother who provides for us, who cannot be owned, and who is revered and cared for. The story continues. In Genesis 2, we are told that a woman is created from Adam's rib. This is the direct opposite of natural reality, where man is born from the body of woman. What is the meaning of this contradiction? It means the editors of the Bible rewrote the myth and obscured the symbols in the story. They left somebody out. Ministers and priests can be very selective when choosing verses from the Bible to perform in their Sunday sermons. The, quote, woman made from man myth is their story of choice. As a child, I read the verses for myself and wondered about all that old stuff, but it was taboo to question the Bible, and there was no opportunity to explore the myths of other cultures. As an adult, I was amazed to find out that there are really two women in the Genesis myth. There is the ever popular Eve and another sister who appears unnamed. In Genesis 1, she was created as Adam's twin and was equal to him. Her name is Lilith. Quote, Lilith is the female of Adam, or Adama, the Hebrew feminine word for earth or soil. Both man and woman originate from Mother Earth, given form by God, from the Book of Lilith by Barbara Black Coltive. A little more investigation made it clear why the preachers chose not to highlight Lilith in their sermons. In Talmudic lore, Lilith was the wife of Adam before Eve. Like Adam, Lilith was created from the dust, Adama, of the earth. She had been one of the wives of Samuel, or Satan, but being wild and passionate, she left her spouse and joined Adam in Eden. Lilith, however, rejected the subordinate role of women and refused to be subservient and submissive to Adam on the grounds that since both had issued from the dust, they were equal. Myth and Sexuality by Jamaki Hightower. Adam tried to have sex with her, and he insisted that she lay on her back. When she refused to take the submissive position, Adam tried to force himself upon her. The culture of my childhood held the belief that a man had the right to sex from his wife anytime, under any circumstances. A woman who refused sex could be beaten, and the man could even call upon the police to reinforce his right to sex. I often heard the men in my community brag among themselves about their power to keep her flat on her back. This is myth as social charter at work, in the home, and supported by the law. But Lilith had a power greater than Eve's. She pronounced the divine names of God, wrestled free, and took off. According to the Old Testament, a mob of angels was sent to fetch Lilith, but she cursed them and fled to the Red Sea. That is where she settled. There she slept with whomever she pleased and had many children. Lilith's refusal to submit may indicate that she belonged to an earlier civilization, one which worshipped a great goddess, a wild woman known by many names: Beleli in the Sumero-Babylonian pantheon, Lilaki, the divine lady, and Lilitu, the Canaanite wind spirit. This earlier goddess was regarded as being powerful, creative, and sexually free. She took lovers as she pleased, and the result of her lovemaking was increased fertility to the land in the form of a great harvest, and increased fertility for humans in the form of children. Because Lilith was not present in the Garden of Eden when the infamous apple was eaten, I speculate that she did not experience the fall and its penalties. It would seem logical that she, like the Virgin Mary, and that's where the problem comes in, is immune to the curse of Eve, menstruation, the labor of childbirth, and eventual death. But the preacher's logic does not allow such a possibility, for this would be an incentive for women to embrace and embody Lilith. Instead, we are told that when Lilith refused to return to Eden, a curse was hailed upon her by God, who decreed that 100 of her offspring would die each day. Mythology tells us that she lives forever as a demonic, highly erotic night spirit who snatches newborn children, particularly males, and assaults the body and senses of men who sleep alone, presumably dreams. Eve, The History of an Idea by Phillips. Lilith, the wild woman of the winds, blows the scene in the garden, so another woman, Eve, replaces her. The Genesis myth is a myth in a world of myths. It is not the myth of the world. More likely, it is the story of a culture imposing itself upon another. For the full story of the patriarchal invasions, please read When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. My adolescent mind couldn't analyze the symbolism in that myth, so I tried to dismiss the story as so much rigmarole and to go on about my business. All I knew at the time was that my woman's body was supposed to be the downfall of all creation. It was my fault that men had to be born, to suffer, and to die. As we all know, Adam and Eve are given a warning by God about a specific tree. Eve wanders around the garden and encounters the snake. The snake, Lilith, tells Eve that the tree in the center of the garden has the power of knowledge. When Adam and Eve eat its fruit, they experience a shift in consciousness, and are able to comprehend spirit and matter, innocence and knowledge, their humanity and their divinity through the power of sexuality. Then God curses them to birth, labor, and death. But Adam and Eve did not die. According to the myth, they lived on, and the relationship between the formerly all-powerful landlord and the tenants in the garden is altered forever. Some legends say that the snake was the first lover of a great goddess and that the first man was created from their mating. In spite of her sin, named Mother of all the living. Mother? This is strangely impressive because at this point in the myth, Eve has not given birth to anybody. But Mother of all the living implies that a great goddess from an earlier civilization has been reduced into of a patriarchal regime. Was the real Eve Adam's mother, who then became his lover? Once the myth is changed, the great mother goddess becomes a childbearing slave to her son husband. Her husband becomes a wanderer in the wilderness, and the family life becomes accursed. Eve gives birth to boy children who work, fight, and kill each other. I will deal with the story of Cain and Abel as the roots of racism in another article. As it stands, the legend of Lilith teaches us that a sexually powerful woman can only become a mother of demons. The legend of Eve teaches us that a creative woman can only become the mother of murderers. Because myth is social charter, we have the power to change it. We must reclaim the images of pre-patriarchal goddesses, study the lives of famous women, and embrace worldviews from many cultures. This will give us the guidance and energy we need to re-script the story, to bring about shifts in consciousness, and to change laws and behaviors. I want the little Black girls to know that they can utter the names of goddess and escape enslavement of any kind. This is the gift of Lilith. Hear now a new creation story. The first two stars. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful garden where green things grew and all manner of beings swam, flew, and walked. The sky above it changed from bright yellow to silvery blue with twinkling lights. The yellow was day, the blue was a moonlit night, and the twinkling lights were the stars. In this garden, there stood a tree which bore circles of delight called fruit. Called fruit. Da 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 da. One night, two stars fell from the sky. Two stars fell into the leaves of the tree and eventually dropped to the ground. The stars cracked open, and inside of them, here goes my crazy computer. Okay, and inside of them lay a creature called woman and another called man. As the sky began to fade from blue to pale yellow, the woman woke up and stretched her beautiful body. She heard the songs of the birds and uttered a strange sound, life. She caught glimpse of a bush cow, a graceful gazelle, prancing across the land. She began to imitate its rhythmic movements and thereby created dance. She danced across the earth to a place where the land was no longer firm and brown, but soft, wet, and clear. The woman looked into the clear wet and saw little creatures moving freely in it. She picked up some of the cool blue stuff and placed it in her mouth. Its taste was sweet and fresh. Water, she thought. and the sweet liquid dripped from her breast. For a great time she walked around the garden, seeing, touching, tasting, and naming creatures and things. She walked and walked until, having come full circle, she stood before the tree where she'd begun. There, wrapped around the tree, was a wonderful creature with sparkling eyes, brightly colored skin, and a flickering tongue. The creature spoke. "Good morning, mother." "Good morning," said the woman. She asked the creature many things, many questions about the place she found herself in. He informed her of the tree of beginnings. He invited her to eat a circle of sweet delight so that she might understand the power of the place where she'd landed. Eve chose a bright red circle and bit into it. As she consumed the flesh of the fruit, visions danced in her head, and she understood time and space and creation. Eve looked down and saw the creature who had fallen to earth beside her. She lifted his head and let sweet juice of the fruit run down her breasts until drops fell onto his lips. The man licked his lips, opened his eyes, and smiled. Eve introduced the man to creation. In gratitude, he kissed her. They both felt a great sensation in their bodies and drew close in order to understand its meaning. The serpent said, "Wrap yourselves around each other as I am around this tree. Then you will know all." So they wrapped themselves around each other and felt a great warmth. The waters of the ocean splashed against the shore, torrential rains fell, and the mountains spit forth fire. Then the winds rose and wrapped them in a blanket of cool. A curious thing happened. Little beings, much like them, sprang from the woman's belly. She named them Child. They wiggled and laughed and cried. Then sweet water, white as the clouds, sprang from Eve's breast. The children took it into their mouths and she fed them. The man looked on, marveling at all the magnificent things she could do.